Hey, what's up? I'm Liz, this is Blitz City DIY, and today is episode 7 of Prime Things I Learned This Week, which is great because 7 is a prime number. So, I like this series because it kind of holds me accountable to constantly be thinking of what I'm learning, what I'm thinking about, and then kind of forces me to constantly be expanding my thinking, and it can also give me some new ideas that otherwise I might not have thought about. And that's exactly what happened this week. I kept thinking about how the emojis, which I know emojis are kind of something people goof on, but I was just thinking from the technical side, because I had originally thought, like, okay, so if I can, on a mobile platform, put in an emoji, and a desktop platform like Windows and Mac, they recognize it, so there's a way to input it. And in episode 5, I figured out the Windows touch keyboard thing, and that you can put them in that way. So then I was like, well, what piece of code is the computer reading out to know to put in that picture, and as a result reading to see what that picture? And some people say you are thinking way too hard about something stupid. But I was just so curious, and so I found out that emojis are essentially little bits of Unicode. So Unicode is like these little 6-7 digit pieces of code. It begins with U and then a series of numbers and letters. And the computer essentially reads that off and goes, oh, that's the A-OK symbol, and then pumps it up, or oh, that's a smiley face, and then pumps it up. And so that's what's kind of going on in the background. And so then the graphical interface where you click and it pops up, that's kind of the way that you're telling the computer to put out that piece of code and read it. So then I started thinking, so if I type out this piece of Unicode and do the commands to have the computer know, okay, you're putting in Unicode and you want a symbol to pop up instead of this string of text, I wonder if there's a way to create a macro to do that, and there is. So then I thought back to a project I did almost a year ago, actually. I think I mentioned in episode 1 of Prime Things I work in education. As a result, a lot of PowerPoint happening in my life. And for those of you that may not have to deal with the wonders of slideshows every day, there are these little tools starting in Office 2013 called Office Ink tools. And essentially what that means is while you're presenting, you can draw on the screen, you can highlight things, and just overall just kind of make it a little bit more interactive with built-in tools. You don't need extra software or anything like that. It's right in there. Now, there are 2 ways that you can have the ink tools be activated. You can either use the on-screen tools that are down at the bottom corner, where you can either click or touch depending on your interface and select, like, I want to draw, I want to use this color. You draw, or you can click. Or there are macro keys, like Control P is for the pen, and you can draw that way. Control E is for the eraser. It's very intuitive. But some people, they don't want to deal with what's on the screen, and they don't want to deal with macro keys either while they're presenting. They just kind of want to focus on the presentation. So then I started thinking, and I didn't actually end up implementing this, but I made it just in case. It didn't end up being necessary, but it was a fun little exercise. I have some experience coding with Arduino and making funky little things, mostly on the music side. And I started thinking, is there a way that I could program an Arduino to have buttons trigger macros so that if someone were drawing along, they're like, oh, I want to switch to the highlighter, they just press a button and then they're doing the highlighter. So there is a way to do that, and I made the project. Essentially what you do, you write a piece of code for the Arduino that tells it when you hit this button attached to this port on the Arduino, send off this macro. But if you do that just by itself, the Arduino isn't going to be able to trigger that. What you need to do, because the computer is still seeing it as an Arduino, so what you need to do is you need to essentially trick the computer and think the Arduino is a keyboard, so that when you press those buttons, it thinks a keyboard is sending off that line of code. So how you do that is you essentially load a little piece of firmware onto the Arduino, reset the Arduino, unplug it from the computer, plug it back in, And then if you look at your devices, after you've done that, the computer thinks it's a keyboard. And then when you're in a presentation and you press the button that you made for Control P, you're on the pen. And there's some tweaking that you do with that to try to get to be as fast as possible without like kind of doing this thing called button bouncing, where like you press it and like it kind of goes crazy because there's too much data being pushed out. And then after I did the main controls, I figured out what keystrokes you would need to get to change the ink colors, and I put those in too. So, knowing that I was able to do this, I thought to myself, well, wouldn't it be cool if I could program it so that different buttons could send off different emojis, so I wouldn't have to bring up the touch keyboard, which is a little clunky, and just put it in, just for convenience and a fun little project. So there are ways so that when you type out Unicode pieces of code and send them out, that will pop up on the screen automatically. You need to do this little registry hack, which I haven't tried yet because I want to research it just a little bit more so I know I'm doing it correctly. So essentially what I'd be doing is adjusting the computer's registry. Then I'd be coding into Arduino with the buttons what emojis I specifically want to pop up in relation to each button. Then loading that piece of keyboard firmware onto the Arduino, and then I'd essentially have a physical emoji keyboard that would be sending out lines of Unicode that the computer would just recognize. The computer would be seeing it as a keyboard physically typing out those pieces of Unicode to create a macro. So I'm gonna do that. I think I'm gonna do that as a little fun little project that might seem a little goofy, but you know, Arduino, since it's open source, you can do just some fun stuff with it and not always have to worry about how practical it is. And the fact that I've already done a project that's similar with macros, and I think macros are getting more and more popular as people want more and more productivity, I think it'd be cool to mess around with Unicode and maybe do something that's a little bit more real world based later on. So those videos will be coming up. I will first do a video on the original project and how you load up the firmware and everything, and then I'll document the actual Unicode project. So this has been another episode of Prime Things I Learned this week. If you liked it, let me know. If you disliked it, also let me know. Find me on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram for behind the scenes on this channel, and also random tech news I think's fun or interesting. Until next time, this has been Blitz City DIY.